77% of Americans have at least one financial regret. That's not a rounding error. That's 3 out of 4 people. And here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. The ones who actually made it to retirement aren't any better off. A research team from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania, specifically Abigail Hurwitz and Olivia Mitchell, interviewed 1,600 retirees with an average age of 71. Over half, 52%, said their biggest regret was not saving more. 1/3 said they wished they'd bought long-term care insurance. Nearly 1 in 5 said they claimed Social Security too early and have been paying for that mistake with every single check since. A 2025 CFP board survey found that 95% of Gen X Americans, people who are right now in the middle of their peak earning years, say their financial regrets have already cost them real money. Nearly half say it cost them at least $100,000. 13% say it cost them $500,000 or more. These aren't people who blew everything on bad bets or schemes. These are ordinary people who followed conventional advice, checked the standard boxes, and still ended up with a list of regrets long enough to fill a legal pad. Here's what makes this genuinely strange. Every single one of these regrets was predictable. They show up in the data again and again across decade after decade of retirement research. The mistakes don't vary much. They rhyme, which means they're avoidable if you know what to look for before you're sitting at 71 running the numbers on what could have been. So today, I'm going to walk through 9 financial decisions that retirees regret more than anything else in order of escalating damage. Not in theory, with actual dollar amounts, actual research, and a framework for what to do differently. Some of these you've probably heard of. But I'm going to show you the angle most people miss, because the surface level advice on almost all of these is wrong in ways that don't become obvious until it's already too late. Here's my central metaphor for this entire video: chess. Almost everyone who plays chess learns by studying openings. You memorize your defenses, your gambits, you study the classics. You get decent at the opening and the middle game. But here's the uncomfortable truth that club players learn and beginners don't. The endgame has completely different rules. Pieces behave differently. Principles that win you the middle game will destroy you in the endgame if you don't adapt. Most people build their entire financial life around the opening game, earning, saving, contributing to their 401k, and then reach the endgame with no understanding of how radically the rules change the moment you flip from accumulating to distributing. Every regret on this list is some version of playing an opening game strategy in the endgame. And once you see that pattern, it becomes very hard to unsee. Before I get to the top of this list, and there is one mistake on here that almost nobody talks about but hits harder than any of the others, let me start with the 2 that feel obvious but whose depth most people completely underestimate. Regret number 1, not starting early enough. I know, you've heard this, but stick with me, because the version of this story you've heard is almost certainly missing the mechanism that makes it catastrophic rather than merely unfortunate. There's a thought experiment about a pond covered in lily pads, where the pad doubles in size every day. On day 30, it covers the entire pond. At what point is it half covered? Day 29? The last doubling does as much work as everything that came before it combined. That is compounding. And here's what that means for anyone who delayed investing by 10 years. You didn't lose the contribution from those 10 years. You lost the doubling power of everything that would have followed those years. It's not linear, it's exponential, which is why I'll start next year is not a minor delay. It is the most expensive financial decision most people make, and it costs almost nothing at the moment it's made. As of the 4th quarter of 2024, the average 401k balance is only $131,700. And the average IRA balance is only $127,534, according to Fidelity. Assuming someone has both accounts, they would still have a lot of saving left to do to hit 10 times the average US salary of $67,920. The gap between what most people actually have and what they need isn't a small rounding error. It's a structural shortfall built over decades of inertia. The biggest regret by far for older Americans was not saving more. Over half, 52% of Hurwitz's and Mitchell's survey respondents expressed this regret. The most common reason given by 29% of respondents was that they were living from day to day. Nearly as many, 27%, said that they simply didn't plan ahead. Not bad investments, not bad luck, inertia dressed up as necessity. Nearly half of Gen X Americans, 48%, estimate their financial missteps have cost them at least $100,000 over their lifetimes, with over 1 in 10, 13% reporting losses of $500,000 or more. And most of those losses aren't from dramatic events. They're from compound inaction. The money that was never invested, the decade that got skipped. You think this problem only matters if you have decades left. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this connects directly to the chess metaphor. In the end game, the same compounding dynamic that worked for you when accumulating now works against you. Every dollar you pull out stops compounding. That sounds obvious. What isn't obvious is how fast it accelerates into a crisis when you combine early withdrawals with the wrong market conditions. Which brings me to regret number 2, and this one is infuriating when you see the actual numbers. Regret number 2, claiming Social Security too early. Nearly 1 in 5 respondents, 19%, regretted claiming Social Security retirement benefits too early. The older the respondents were, the more likely they were to express this regret. Because you don't feel the full damage of claiming at 62 until you're 75 and watching how much less your check is than it could have been every month for the rest of your life. Those who choose to claim Social Security at age 62 instead of age 67, the full retirement age for those born in 1960 or later, receive 30% less in monthly benefits for the rest of their life, permanently. And on the other end, delaying Social Security until age 70 results in a roughly 24% higher monthly payment than if you claimed benefits at age 67, also locked in, as long as you're collecting benefits. The maximum monthly Social Security retirement benefit in 2026 is $5,181 for those who claim at age 70. To put this in perspective, if you retire at full retirement age of 67, the max is $4,152. While retiring at 62 yields just $2,969, that is a $2,212 per month difference between claiming at 62 versus 70 every month, forever. For a couple where both spouses have earnings histories, this difference can define the entire character of their retirement. A 2022 study published by the National Bureau of Economic Research found that 90% of Americans would receive higher lifetime Social Security benefits by waiting until age 70 to collect. 90%. Yet most people don't. From January through July 2025, more than 2.3 million people filed for Social Security retirement benefits, up 16% from the same period in 2024. That's a reversal of a decades-long trend of older Americans increasingly claiming Social Security later. People know the math. They're filing early anyway, out of fear, out of financial necessity, because they got pushed out of a job they didn't plan to leave. That's due to concerns about the future of Social Security, which is fueling fears that the money may not be there if they wait. Social Security is indeed facing a financial crunch with an aging US, population resulting in its payments now outpacing contributions from workers. Yet many people wrongly believe that means Social Security will halt payments if the trust funds become insolvent. Payments would continue in such an event, but benefits would be reduced by about 20%. You know what reduces them more than 20%? Filing at 62. That's the chess endgame thinking, showing up as a panic move, rushing the critical decision out of fear and locking yourself into a worse position for 20 plus years. The survivor benefit angle makes this even more important, and almost nobody models it. If you're married and you're the higher earner, your benefit becomes your spouse's benefit when you die. Filing at 62 instead of 70 doesn't hurt just you. It potentially leaves your widow or widower with a fraction of what they could have had for the rest of their life. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you the mistake on this list that people almost never see coming until it physically arrives as a bill and it has nothing to do with your savings rate or your investment returns. But first, the one retirement mistake that sounds purely technical but is actually a psychological trap that catches even financially sophisticated people. Regret number 3, no withdrawal strategy and no understanding of sequence of returns risk. A survey conducted in October of 2024 by Erosion found that 49% had no formal withdrawal strategy in retirement, choosing to just withdraw what they wanted or needed as they went along. 44% said inflation had no impact on what they withdrew, and 29% had no strategy for adjusting spending based on market performance. Only 20% said they had a plan for healthcare or other unexpected costs, and only 17% said they managed taxes on their withdrawals. Here's the thing. The whole game changes the moment you flip from saving to spending, not gradually, instantaneously. And the specific danger has a name: sequence of returns risk. The risk that the market crashes right as you start drawing down. Because when you're still working, a 30% market drop means you buy at a discount. When you're retired and withdrawing, a 30% drop means you are selling at a loss. You sell low, lock in the damage, and now you have fewer assets left to recover. 2 retirees with identical portfolios and withdrawal rates could experience the same average annual return and end up with vastly different outcomes. In the worst case scenario, one might run out of money, while the other sails through retirement comfortably. That's not theoretical. It's provable with basic arithmetic. The adverse market returns, particularly those that occur early in retirement when balances are largest, coupled with planned withdrawals, can adversely affect retirement success. Fowles' research illustrates that losses experienced in the first several years in distribution are the most detrimental. He estimates that 77% of the final retirement outcome can be explained by the average return of the first 10 years of retirement. Think about what that means for the couple who retired in 2007. Consider Robert and Lisa, a couple in their late 60s who retired in early 2008, just before the financial crisis hit. They had diligently saved $1.5 million and planned to withdraw 4% annually, $60,000 to supplement their Social Security income. As the market crashed, their portfolio value plummeted. By the end of 2008, their $1.5 million had shrunk to about $900,000. Suddenly, their $60,000 withdrawal represented nearly 7% of their portfolio, a rate that could quickly deplete their savings. Robert and Lisa faced a difficult choice: maintain their planned lifestyle and risk running out of money, or significantly cut back on their retirement dreams. This is the cruel reality of sequence risk. It can force retirees to make uncomfortable compromises at a time when they should be enjoying the fruits of their labor. And the standard prescription, use the 4% rule, assumes none of this volatility on the front end. The withdrawal rate is the result of a 1994 study that found that retirees can safely withdraw a maximum of 4% of their starting balance each year for 30 years and not run out of money, provided the portfolio is invested in a mix of stocks and bonds. That study was designed for a specific historical period with a specific interest rate environment. It was not designed for a 30-year retirement starting in 2026 when someone retires at 55. The endgame rules are different now. The withdrawal order matters equally. Most people think big account first. But if you pull from your traditional 401k before touching your Roth, you're generating taxable income on every dollar, potentially triggering higher Medicare premiums through the income-related monthly adjustment amount, and paying taxes on money that didn't have to be taxed yet. As Andrew Bachman, Director of Financial Solutions at Fidelity Investments, puts it, many people are seeking ways to help reduce the taxes that they will pay over the course of their retirement. Your withdrawal strategy is critical. How and when you choose to withdraw from various accounts can impact your taxes in different ways. Pulling from the wrong account in the wrong year can cost you years off your portfolio's lifespan. You spent decades putting money in the right places. Pulling it out in the wrong order undoes a lot of that work. By the way, hit subscribe if you like the content. Otherwise, YouTube's algorithm may never show you my videos again. Regret number 4, ignoring the healthcare gap before Medicare. This one tends to land like cold water. You spend your whole career assuming Medicare kicks in at some point. Medicare coverage for most older Americans won't begin until age 65. Finding affordable health insurance between ages 62 and 65 can be challenging, especially if you retire before qualifying for Medicare. Estimated average monthly benchmark premiums escalate to $1,072 at age 62, $1,101.80 by age 63, and top out at $1,120 for those ages 64 to 65. That is over $12,864 per year per person, on top of deductibles and out-of-pocket costs. And if ACA enhanced subsidies were part of your plan, many people qualified for a subsidy to help pay ACA premiums based on household income. But the subsidies expired at the end of 2025, and the outcome of efforts in Congress to restore them is uncertain. Once you hit 65 and Medicare starts, you might think the problem resolves. It does not. Fidelity Investments' 2025 annual retiree healthcare cost estimate revealed that a 65-year-old retiring in 2025 can expect to spend an average of $172,500 in healthcare and medical expenses throughout retirement. This represents a more than 4% increase over 2024 and continues the general upward trajectory of projected health-related expenses since Fidelity's inaugural $80,000 estimate in 2002. And critically, the estimate does not include long-term care expenses. Couples at age 75 to 84 have estimated routine healthcare costs of up to $23,000 per year, increasing to $40,000 at age 85 and beyond. Those are not catastrophic health events. Those are ordinary, annually recurring medical expenses that a static model will not capture. Recent Fidelity research shows 1 in 5 Americans say they have never considered healthcare needs during retirement, a figure that rises to 1 in 4 among Gen X. People build retirement models with investment returns and withdrawal rates and leave healthcare as a blank. That's a denial problem masquerading as a planning problem. The endgame rule: they didn't know. Healthcare is not a fixed cost. It's a growing, unpredictable, dominant cost that the standard save enough and you'll be fine framework systematically underestimates. Here's the part that never makes it into a retirement calculator. Knowing these numbers changes nothing unless you build a system around them. Most retirement planning tools, the kind your advisor gives you, the ones built into bank websites, assume stable healthcare costs, a fixed withdrawal rate, and no sequence risk. They give you a projection. What they don't give you is a framework for when the projection is wrong. I built something called the exit code. It's a digital book based on 50 years of actual retirement data, not opinion, not anecdote, data distilled into a mathematical framework for figuring out when you can actually leave the rat race. Not someday, a specific date with a margin of safety that accounts for the variables that break most retirement plans. A few things inside it that connect directly to this video. The first is what I call the $14,000 invisible bill, the insurance gap that lands on early retirees before Medicare. Most people have no idea this number is waiting for them. It's not in the standard calculator. The second is the dynamic withdrawal method, a replacement for the 4% rule that adjusts to sequence of returns risk in real time instead of locking you into a fixed drawdown strategy that assumes markets cooperate. The research behind it is far more recent than 1994. And the third is the 58% rule, a framework built around the reality that more than half of Americans exit the workforce before they're financially ready, and how to build a buffer that makes an involuntary exit survivable without permanently wrecking everything else. It costs less than one dinner out, and you can get it through the link in the description. Every year you delay understanding this system is a year the math compounds against you. That's not urgency, that's arithmetic. Stay with me, because this next part changes the picture considerably, especially if you think the first 4 were the main events. Regret number 5. Skipping long-term care insurance. 1/3 of the retirees in the Hurwitz and Mitchell survey said that if they could do it all over again, they would buy long-term care insurance, which helps cover the cost of long-term care and is less expensive the earlier it's purchased. Let me tell you why that number makes complete sense when you see the cost data. The national annual median cost of a semi-private room in a nursing home rose to $111,325, an increase of 7%, while the cost of a private room in a nursing home increased 9% to $127,750 per year. Not a lifetime number, per year. The national median monthly cost for assisted living communities increased 5% to $6,200 per month, or $74,400 annually. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services estimated that 49% of men and 64% of women turning 65 in 2022 would need significant long-term care. 7 out of 10 people will require long-term care in their lifetime, and Medicare doesn't cover it. Costs related to long-term care aren't typically covered by Medicare, and very few retirees have insurance for it. Roughly 1 in 5 Americans turning 65 will face more than $200,000 in long-term care costs. While most people receiving long-term care may only need it for a short amount of time, almost 1 in 4 older adults, 24%, get more than 2 years of paid long-term care. Only 13% of retirees are very confident they would be able to afford long-term care if needed, and only 13% have long-term care insurance. When asked if their health declines and they need help with daily activities, almost half, 48%, say they plan to rely on family members and friends to provide such care. Relying on family is not a financial plan. That's a wish. And it's a wish that, when it doesn't work out, tends to devastate not 1 retirement, but 2. Here's a story that illustrates the real texture of this problem. There was a retired school teacher, I'll call him Gary. He's a composite of people I've heard about through financial advisors over the years who retired at 63 in Ohio with his wife. He'd been careful, paid off the house, had $400,000 in retirement accounts, collecting Social Security, felt fine. Then his wife had a stroke at 72. She needed full-time, skilled care. 2 years of nursing facility cost later 2 times $127,000. Roughly $254,000, most of the retirement savings was gone. Gary hadn't bought long-term care insurance because the premiums felt unnecessary at the time. $50 a month feels different from $127,000 a year. But they're the same risk, expressed differently. He spent the last years of his own health managing the financial fallout of a risk he decided to self-insure. Long-term care insurance can seem costly. Annual premiums with 3% growth for a healthy 60-year-old average $2,600, $10 for males, and $4,550 for the females in 2025. But with the median annual cost of a private room in a nursing home at $127,750 in 2024, and with the majority of people needing some form of assistance into older ages, it may be more expensive not to have it. Generally speaking, the most cost-effective time to buy is in your 50s to early 60s. And premiums may be tax deductible if your overall medical expenses exceed 7.5% of your income. Every year you wait to buy it, the premiums go up. Every year after about 60, the probability of being denied coverage increases. It's a move that belongs in the opening game, decided in the middle game, that most people only realize matters in the end game. Regret number 6, being forced into retirement before you were financially ready. Here's the reversal you've been waiting for. You probably think the problem is people choosing to retire too early. The data shows most early retirees didn't choose it at all. According to a study of 3,661 American retirees between the ages of 62 and 75 completed by the Employee Benefit Research Institute in 2024, 58% retired earlier than they expected to. Most of those surveyed, 38% had to retire early due to a health problem or disability, followed by 23% who had to retire because of company downsizing, closing, or reorganization. Only 21% said they retired early because they could afford to. So the plan of, I'll work until I'm fully ready, is a plan that depends entirely on variables you don't control. Your health, your employer's survival. A layoff at 57, when the job market for your specialty has an age problem, it's not legally allowed to admit. Retirees retired before the traditional retirement age of 65. The median retirement age in the Transamerica data was 62. This connects directly back to the Social Security problem. If you're 58, just lost your job, and your retirement account isn't where it needs to be, the math on wait until 67 to file Social Security becomes a different problem. Because you need income now. You file at 62, you lock in the 30% penalty, and you've now compounded 2 forced moves into a permanent handicap. The buffer that should have existed enough liquid assets to cover 18 to 24 months of expenses before touching retirement accounts or Social Security is the chess piece that protects you from the forced move. Most people don't build it. They see it as inefficient, cash sitting in low-yield accounts when it could be in the market, until the moment they desperately need it and don't have it. Here's where it gets really interesting, because regrets 7, 8, and 9 aren't usually at the top of anyone's worst retirement mistakes list. But the data tells a more uncomfortable story. And the last one on this list is the most insidious of all, because it feels like discipline while it's happening. Regret number 7, carrying high interest debt into retirement. About 68% of retirees had outstanding credit card debt in 2024, up substantially from 40% in 2022 and 43% in 2020, according to a new poll by the Employee Benefit Research Institute. It's alarming for retirees living on a fixed income, said Bridget Bearden, a research strategist at EBRI who analyzed the survey data. According to the Federal Reserve, the average interest assessed on credit cards in the second quarter of 2024 was 22.76%, a near record high. Households led by someone aged 65 to 74 have an average of $7,720 in credit card debt, according to the Federal Reserve's latest data. Now imagine running that on a fixed income. You're pulling from your traditional 401k, generating taxable income that affects your bracket and your Medicare premiums to service a 23% interest rate debt, while your portfolio simultaneously absorbs whatever the market decides to do in the first years of your retirement. Each problem amplifies the others. In 1989, about 58% of older adults over the age of 50 carried debt into retirement. By 2020, that percentage had jumped to 78%, according to Ming-Li Zhong, a senior research associate at the Urban Institute. There's a mortgage dimension to this story that deserves its own paragraph. According to the Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies' 2023 report, Housing America's Older Adults, 41% of homeowners ages 65 to 79 carried mortgage debt in 2022, compared to just 24% in 1989. Among homeowners age 80 and older, more than 30% had a mortgage in 2022, a dramatic increase from only 3% in 1989. People refinanced, pulled equity, extended their loan terms, and are now managing housing debt in their 80s on fixed incomes. Almost 40% of people 80 and up pay at least 30% of their income on either rent or mortgage monthly payments. The debt problem in retirement is psychological before it's mathematical. People carry lifestyle expectations from their earning years into their fixed income years. They don't dramatically restructure spending. They make incremental adjustments, reach for the credit card to fill the gaps, and tell themselves it's temporary. Then the interest compounds at 23%, and the temporary becomes permanent. It's a quiet bankruptcy that builds over years while looking like ordinary life. Regret number 8, underestimating inflation's long-term erosion. Social Security recipients have lost about 20% of their buying power since 2010, according to the Senior Citizens League. The cost of living adjustment is designed to offset inflation, but medical inflation, food inflation, and housing inflation have outpaced the COLA calculations in most years since then. So recipients get an adjustment, they just don't get enough adjustment. Healthcare expenses have been climbing at a rate of 1.5 to 2 times the rate of inflation, which means if you model your retirement using standard inflation assumptions, your healthcare budget is systematically wrong in a direction that only goes one way, more expensive. Here's a parable that illustrates the slow motion nature of this problem. Imagine you're at a party and someone is quietly lowering the thermostat by 1 degree every 30 minutes. The first hour, you don't notice. By midnight, you're freezing, but you have no memory of when it got cold because it happened so gradually. Inflation in retirement works exactly like that. In year 1, you're fine. In year 5, the gap between your model expenses and your actual expenses is noticeable but manageable. By year 15, the gap is a crisis that has no obvious cause because the cause was distributed across 100 monthly grocery bills, 100 copays, 100 utility invoices. The retirement plan that looked sound at 65 is underwater at 78 for reasons that feel mysterious but are actually completely mechanical. Social Security benefits have lost 20% of their buying power since 2010, according to a 2025 report, and the trajectory for healthcare costs suggests that gap will widen over time, not narrow. Building a 2% inflation assumption into a 30-year retirement model when healthcare inflates at 4% per year creates a compounding error that doesn't announce itself until it's too large to fix. Regret number 9, and this is the one that deserves far more attention than it gets, is trusting the standard retirement script without ever stress testing it. The script goes, maximize your 401k contributions. Pick a target date fund, wait until 65, claim Medicare, draw down 4%, done. That script isn't wrong, exactly. It's a first draft. It doesn't account for forced exits at 58. It doesn't account for the healthcare gap between 62 and 65. It doesn't model sequence of returns risk. It treats long-term care as zero until it's catastrophically non-zero. It doesn't account for the tax drag of pulling from pre-tax accounts in the wrong order. And it uses a 1994 withdrawal rate that was designed for a 30-year retirement, when many of you watching this are planning to retire at 55 and potentially need the money for 40 years. An annual retirement confidence survey from the Employee Benefit Research Institute and Greenwald Research found more than a third of Americans don't think they'll have enough saved for retirement, the highest proportion the survey has recorded since 2017. The script isn't giving people confidence anymore. It's not close enough to reality. Here's where Gary's story comes back. Gary followed the script. He saved consistently. He contributed to his 401k. He did the conventional things. What he didn't do was stress test his plan against the reality of one forced exit and one long-term care event. And when both happened within 10 years of each other, the layoff at 58 and his wife's stroke at 72, the plan collapsed, not because he was irresponsible, but because the plan was never designed to handle the actual conditions it met. The chess pieces were in good positions for the opening game. Nobody had rehearsed the end game. Now, let me put some of this together in a concrete scenario. Take Michael, who's 62, logistics manager, 30 years in, has $425,000 in a traditional 401k, owns his home with $80,000 left on the mortgage at 4.5%, carries $12,000 in credit card debt at 21%. He just got laid off in a restructuring. He's deciding what to do. The panic move, which the data confirms is the most common outcome. He files for Social Security at 62. His projected benefit at full retirement age of 67 was $2,400 per month. Filing at 62 locks it in at $1,680, a permanent 30% reduction. He starts pulling from his 401k immediately, generating taxable income that affects his ACA subsidy eligibility. He pays roughly $12,000 per year for marketplace health insurance for 3 years until Medicare. He doesn't address the credit card because the monthly budget is already stretched. The credit card at 21% compounds quietly in the background. Do the math on the credit card alone. $12,000 at 21%, minimum monthly payments. That's over 18 years of payments and roughly $21,000 in interest before it's retired. Meanwhile, the permanent Social Security reduction, $720 per month less than he would have received at 67 amounts, to $8,640 per year, every year for the rest of his life. If Michael lives to 82, that's $172,800 in foregone benefits. On a portfolio of $425,000, that's 40% of his retirement savings lost, not from investment losses, but from one panic decision made on a bad Tuesday when he got the layoff call. The alternative path isn't glamorous. Work part-time for a few years, bridge the healthcare gap with careful income management to preserve subsidy eligibility, aggressively pay down the credit card before touching the 401k, and delay Social Security until 67 or later. It requires planning, flexibility, and the discipline to not treat the retirement accounts as a checking account during the bridge period. But the financial outcome over 20 years is dramatically better, not because of better investments, because of better sequencing. The standard retirement advice will not hand you the framework to think through that sequencing. It will give you a target savings number and tell you to pick a fund. Retiree financial advice has a systematic blind spot, and that blind spot is the end game. Every financial product, every fund company, every retirement calculator is designed to help you accumulate. The accumulation phase has beautiful math. Put money in, watch it grow, feel good. The distribution phase is messier, less linear, and far more dependent on decisions that don't get made until the moment of crisis, by which point the margin for error is gone. Gary's story resolves the way most of these stories resolve. He eventually stabilized. He moved to a smaller house. He cut his spending drastically. He's not suffering in any dramatic sense, but the retirement he'd imagined, the one he'd spent 30 years working toward, is not the retirement he's living. The gap between those two things is the accumulated weight of 9 decisions that each seemed reasonable at the moment they were made. 3 practical takeaways, calibrated specifically to this list. First, model the pre-Medicare healthcare gap as a hard number, not a vague concern. Get an actual marketplace premium estimate for your age, health status, and projected income level in your specific state under current 2026 conditions. Then budget for it the same way you'd budget for rent. If you're planning to retire before 65 and that number hasn't landed in your spreadsheet yet, your retirement plan has a hole in it. Second, figure out your withdrawal sequence before you retire. The order in which you pull from taxable accounts, traditional 401k and IRA accounts, and Roth accounts determines your tax bracket, your Medicare premium tier, and how many years your money lasts. This is solvable, but it has to be solved proactively, not improvise while you're already spending. The endgame piece that almost nobody places before they need it. Third, run a stress test on your plan using a bad first decade. Assume the market drops 30% in year 2 of your retirement and stays flat for 3 years. Can your withdrawal strategy survive that without forcing you to dramatically cut spending or permanently deplete the portfolio? If the math doesn't hold under that scenario, you're not planning around sequence risk, you're hoping you won't face it. Sequence risk is not a rare catastrophic event. It's a regularly recurring feature of markets. Planning for it now costs you nothing. Discovering it unprepared can cost you everything. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. And every retiree on that list of 9 regrets will tell you the same thing. The hard part wasn't earning the money, it was learning the end game rules about 15 years too late. The opening game is well documented. The end game is where most retirements actually get decided